There was no way Day of the Tentacle would have its 30th anniversary unnoticed on this channel. After all, despite the admiration I expressed last year for Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, this 1993 LucasArts classic is an equally worthwhile member of the adventure genre's giants gallery. It's closer to the style and feel primarily associated with this company's games, so in other words, we have wacky characters, a humorous art style, and hilarious writing.
I'm having a crisis here, a warehouse of anguish.
Most of the footage you will see throughout the video will use the game's classic look, mainly for nostalgia baiting, I mean for posterity's sake, but if low-res 2D art is an eyesore, have no worries because the remastered edition has an up-to-date look, which I'll discuss later. With that out of the way, let's get to business. Day of the Tentacle is, in fact, the sequel of Maniac Mansion, but there's no missing context from not playing both of them. I say this as someone who didn't play the 1987 release, so there's that. The newer game's events occur at the mansion/motel of mad scientist Fred Edison. The toxic waste from his crazy experiments have mutated one of his pet tentacles, which is now poised on world domination. I swear this isn't the plot of some degenerate hentai, please come back. It's just a story about the walking and talking tentacle that took the eat uranium memes too seriously, that's all. Our protagonists have been called by Green Tentacle's plea for help, since the good doctor was ready to kill him and his mutated evil friend to get rid of the problem. Arriving at the motel, Bernard, the group's nerd, finds the secret laboratory and frees the tentacles, unleashing the evil one over an unsuspecting world. A minor blunder that will indeed have no consequences, of course. Fortunately, Dr. Fred's got the solution in the form of a time machine. With it, he plans to send our three heroes on a mission to disable the toxic sludge machine before Purple Tentacle drinks the polluted waters that gave him his evil powers. Unfortunately, things go quickly wrong as the diamond used in the device is fake and promptly cracks after sending Bernard, Laverne and Hoagie into the past. Consequently, they each end up 200 years away from one another, with Hoagie in the past, Bernard in the present and Laverne in the future, also in a tree. They cannot return until the diamond is replaced and the machines get electricity once more. Something easier said than done, considering Hoagie ends up around the time the US Constitution was drafted, Laverne in a world where Purple Tentacle enslaved humanity, and Dr. Fred is too broke to get a new diamond. Despite these difficulties, our heroes march on. And here comes the game's shtick. The three characters can be individually controlled in each of their timelines. This is an exciting twist to Fate of Atlantis' system, since the characters cannot directly interact with one another. The most they can do is send each other objects by dunking them in the time machine's toilets, because that's a very user-friendly feature to have. But the best part is that the game's puzzles thoroughly take advantage of this setup. More precisely, actions in the past have consequences in the future, and there are some clever things you can do because of that. One example is that Hoagie needs vinegar to build a super battery for his time machine, but only has a bottle of wine at his disposal. The solution to this is to get it in a time capsule and have Laverne retrieve it as vinegar 400 years in the future before sending it back to him. Another instance is when Bernard takes a hamster, sticks it into an ice freezer and puts a shirt in the dryer for 200 years with an amusingly appropriate number of quarters.
I did actual math for how much money should be in that pile of quarters to make this thing run.
That's Dave. He would actually calculate how many to run for how many years? For 200 years?
$800,000 or something. Yeah, 200 years to the minute.
And I'm glad you did that, because someone else on the internet would have done it and said we used the wrong number if we didn't do that.
Afterwards, Laverne has to defrost it in a futuristic microwave and use the now very shrunken sweater to keep him dry and warm. Remember when I complained about time travel paradoxes being handled poorly in the likes of original war or Bioshock Infinite? Well, a comedy written in 1993 managed it perfectly. Early on it sets the rules and sticks with them to the very end, without any plot black holes in the middle, and they don't even have to be pretentious while doing it. Isn't that nice? There are more examples of messing with the time-space continuum, but I won't spoil all of them for those that haven't played this yet. But hearing myself speak out loud about the walkthrough of these puzzles leads me to a very important point. You see, I've mentioned in my Fate of Atlantis review that LucasArts adventure games have an issue with moon logic puzzle solutions. Day of the Tentacle is one of the titles suffering from this issue. On the one hand, I breezed through a lot of the game because I perceived many puzzles as straightforward. Even more cryptic solutions are hinted at earlier in the game if you listen carefully. But on the other hand, I've played the game dozens of times back in the day and remembered many solutions. So while I'm not the best judge in the difficulty department, I can still see why some are not as logical as it should be. They rely on following the same thought path as the person who designed them instead of thinking out of the box. For example, the wine to vinegar solution is based on the common misconception that all wines turn into vinegar when it only occurs in the presence of a particular bacteria. Of course, Tim Schafer and his people aren't chemists and don't have Google at fingertips to verify this information effortlessly in 1993, so this isn't me dunking on them for being ignoramuses. But the point remains that if you operate on your own knowledge, you risk completely missing out solutions that the puzzle designer might think easy as pie. I would say that this issue doesn't affect the majority of puzzles, fortunately, but as I mentioned earlier, I already knew the solutions by heart for most of them, so take this with a pinch of salt. A part of my ability to memorize so many of them is played by the game's short length. I finished it in around 4 hours while listening to old dialogue and not being the most efficient with the order I move the characters around. There are not many rooms to explore, but quite a bit of backtracking is involved. Thankfully, the game has the excellent mechanic of giving objects from one playable character to another without having to move each of them to the time machine, since half of the puzzles rely on doing this. That's why it's a shame this mechanic is not very obvious, meaning I wasted a lot of time until I remembered that doing this was possible. Not salty at all. Most of the game's puzzles involve object interaction, and only in a few cases do you get what you want via the dialogue options. The latter is mostly fluff for progression purposes, but it's the meat and bones of the game. Not just because it contains a bunch of hints for the puzzles, but because that's where the humor's at. Day of the Tentacle is funny most of the time and hilarious in many instances. The same goes for the characters concocted by Schafer and the other writers. For instance, Hoagie, the group's fat metalhead, meets up with the Founding Fathers, consisting of a ridiculously narcissistic Washington.
Does Mrs. Washington know you wear so much makeup?
One must wear makeup when one receives the phenomenal amount of media attention that I do. It's quite likely that I'll be president soon, you know. Do you think I should be the ecology president or the education president?
A completely aloof Jefferson.
Well, later, dude.
What? What's going to happen later?
And a Hancock constantly complaining about freezing in the middle of the summer.
I don't get any respect around here. Why, I bet if George I spent the winter in Valley Forge, Washington was cold, we'd get some heat in here.
Upstairs, he meets with the Betsy Ross that's so fed up with working on a continually changing flag design that she's willing to work with even the most ridiculous suggestions just to be over with it.
We need a babe in a leather bikini swinging a broadaxe.
Oh, what the heck. At this point, I'd do anything just to have it over with.
I could go on and on with other examples, but discovering them on your own is the fun way to find out about them.
Voila!
You're quite a man.
Yes, I know.
Talking to each as much as possible is the way to go, no question about it. The art and animation style is as cartoony as it can get. The fact that the likes of Chuck Jones are quoted as inspirations in the developer commentary is of no surprise to me. Anything you'd expect from your childhood cartoons can be found here, from slapstick humor to how everything looks. The same goes for the remastered art. Fortunately, LucasArts managed to safely keep all their original artwork, so we have the same art here but with the advantage of 30 years of technology over the original. This can be said about all the other remasters done by Double Fine, but still a major shame we never got a remake of Curse of Monkey Island, but that's a story for another day. There is one gameplay change in the remaster though. You can't play as Hoagie and Laverne right away as you could in the original release. You get access to Hoagie once you find the Super Battery blueprint as Bernard, and only after you chop down the tree in the past you can start playing with Laverne. I don't mind this change since it's a way to ease people into the concept of multiple playable characters who can trade objects through the time machine. What I don't like is the changed interface. It's supposed to be streamlined by auto-hiding the entire command panel, but it has its issues. If you need to exit a room to your left, you'll often hover your mouse over the tab that pulls up the UI over what you wanted to click on. For object interaction, here is now a contextual menu when you right click, but it's hit or miss. Sometimes it auto selects the correct command type, which does make the experience smoother, but in many cases the options that pop up are the useless "I can't do that" kind. Sure, it should be up to the player to discover that said interactions are unnecessary, but the game's design goes against that. After all, there are plenty of hints regarding puzzle solutions throughout the dialogue. The correct approach would have been to display all 9 commands, even if they would have cluttered the screen. It's not like there wasn't enough real estate with the bottom menu auto hidden. Fortunately, the keyboard shortcuts work just as before. Another issue I have is with the developer commentaries, not with the commentaries themselves, because those are great, even if I wish there were more of them. The problem is that they get interrupted if you leave the room before they finish. Some of the commentaries are long, so you often do nothing in empty rooms waiting for the audio file to stop playing. Also, there is no other way to re-listen to them except for walking in the same room they were available initially, which means that those that trigger on specific puzzle interactions can only be heard once. Since you already have a big artwork gallery which you can unlock as you play, it would have been nice to add the comments as audio files which you can replay in the main menu. As a nitpick, I find it strange that they changed some sound effects. The first instinct is to point fingers at sound compression, with the only other plausible reason for the changes is that they were copyrighted, but many of them are from sound libraries that are either open or in the possession of LucasArts. And just like the artwork, the original sound files were all preserved, so they were remastered at good quality for the classic version, and neither explanation works because of that. The problem is that some of the chosen new sounds are straight up weird in the remastered version. Sure, I can blame having the original sounds seared into my memory, but I can't shake up the feeling that at least some of them are not good fits. Have a listen, maybe I am crazy after all. But with that being said, both versions are perfectly playable. I'm a big fan of remastered projects that allow players to play with the original look, especially when you can do it on the fly with the press of a button. Even if playing the original game on modern systems is trivial with the help of ScumVM, this edition containing both the old version and the remaster is a good choice. In the end, they both provide a very entertaining experience. With that being said, thanks to everyone for watching my video. Don't forget to click the buttons and share this video with your like-minded fellows. Until next time, cheers!
Let's discuss philosophy.
Okay, here's my philosophy. Life is completely pointless, especially mine.
Have you read Camus?
Oh, who cares? Philosophers are all failures like me who couldn't make it in a real profession.